Hello, my crafting friends. My name is Leah Day, and I'm trying a brand new craft today. It is lino cutting, and this is actually the third lino cut I've ever done. So in this video, I'm going to show you what this is like for a total beginner. I've really never done anything like this before, so you're going to see what it feels like to cut the linoleum and how to do very first block printing with simple ink on paper. So let's get started learning how to do some lino cutting together. So I'm just getting started with lino cutting, so I picked up this kit. Comes with lots of different things. I'll pull everything out and show you what it comes with. So this big thingy is to help you grip your lino so that you don't have to put your hand down on it, which you could slice your hand, so be careful with that. I got a nice variety of pieces of linoleum to cut, including some of these little stamps. We got two of these little stamps that are slightly softer. And this is soft cut material. It's just ever so slightly rubbery and softer feel, so it'll be interesting to see how that cuts in comparison to the linoleum. And then I have already sliced into the test piece. It was like a little scrap that was included, and I made these two. And I learned a lot making just these two, and we'll talk about that definitely. So we also got a little tray. This is to hold the paint, a little brayer or a roller thingy, a little instruction sheet, and we've got a tube of black printing ink, and then this is to use with the stamps, and our tool, this is kind of a combo thing, it's really neat. Our tools and all of the bits, all of the blades are inside this, so you just unscrew the handle and take that out, and then pop off this top, and then there are all of your little blades. So I'll pull them out here. And so you just pick out a blade that you want to work with and put this piece on first. So I'm going to screw that in, and then I'm going to work with this blade. This is the A blade, and basically it's got a little bevel on two sides and then a little dip. And this is kind of a safety blade. It helps you make cuts and not mess up. Just a little bit of experimenting that I did, I found this to be a good one to start with. And we'll kind of talk through all of those blades. So what did I learn in doing these? These are quite literally the only two lino cuts I've ever done, and I learned a lot. So this was my first, and I sketched out a flower. It's actually supposed to be kind of a flaming sun design, and there was a center circle. But as I got started, that was really where I started, and it was really tough because trying to cut that circle perfectly, I just kept cutting and cutting and cutting at it. As you can see, it got down to a very tiny little dot in the center because I just couldn't seem to get that nice smooth curve. Again, I also started cutting down the petals, the sun rays, until they became almost flower petals. I think it's really easy to go at something and then just keep cutting at it. And I think the better thing to do is to just kind of, even if the line isn't perfect, just go with it. It's supposed to have a hand-carved look, accept that, and keep going. And then here is the other, this was just a little scrap piece. What I did was I started out testing each one of these blades, and I would just make a couple slices across on this piece. And then I was like, well, I don't want to waste that. So I just turned it into this. It's just kind of, you know, some squares that are printed down, and then once I print that on fabric, it'll make kind of a boxy, blocky print. I think that'll be kind of cool. Now, I did buy a few extra things at the craft store just to play with. I got an extra piece of linoleum, one that is mounted on a piece of wood, just to see what that would be like. And then I got some fabric paint because, of course, my goal with this is not just to print paper. My goal is to print fabric. And so I got a bottle of black and a bottle of white to play with. And I do have a project that I'd like to cut out, and I'll show you what I've done so far on this. So I'm going to zoom in just so you can really see what I'm working on. So this is a sketch that I drew this morning, and I just sat down at the kitchen table and traced out this piece of linoleum, and it was that big. And I've decided that I want to print my own thank you cards. And so I really wanted to make it more personal than just a store-bought card, and to be able to cut out this cute design and to be able to print my own cards. I thought that would be kind of nice. So I drew this. Then I grabbed a piece of tracing paper and I traced that exactly, and you can see I colored it in. Then I took it and I flipped the tracing paper over, and the reason why I felt like I needed to use tracing paper is so I could see through it. So then I placed it onto that piece of linoleum and then traced it again, and you can see what this has done now. This has flipped it over, so now I have the reverse image on that linoleum. And I know that graphite is kind of hard to pick up, so I'm kind of wiggling it back and forth here in the light, so hopefully you can see that. It's pretty clear to me. I can see that pretty easily, so I think this is going to be okay to cut. So let's see here. I'm going to get started, and I think the first step is to cut around all of the letters. So I think I'm going to start with the straight ones first. And like I said, I am just getting started with this. And I want to grab that tool here. Let's see if this helps. This is what I said before. This kind of helps to grip the linoleum so you don't cut yourself, because, you know, having my hand right here in the tool, that is sharp and that's going straight at my hand. So that's probably not all that smart. So let's grab this and just kind of squish it in there, and I'll use my thumb to press against the linoleum and make a smooth cut. And even if I mess this up, I don't think that's that big of a deal. You know, I think it's really good to just give yourself permission to mess up, give yourself permission to have fun with it more than anything else. I mean, that's kind of the key to learning anything. I am finding that, you know, as I'm just trying to cut out these few little cuts, I'm rotating the piece a lot, and I don't know if that's necessarily the right thing to do, but that's feeling comfortable for me. And I do like this particular cutting blade for this because it's producing a really nice thin cut. You know, it's not too deep, not too wide, and I feel like I'm in control over that blade, and I like that a lot. So I'll take a little nip there, and I think I'll go on ahead and start that side of the T. And you know, with any craft, you kind of have to look at, okay, where does the danger lie? You know, how can I get myself into trouble? And I think with this, it's mostly just the potential for cutting yourself with the blade. And so just keep that in mind. I feel like this is a little on the clunky side, but at the same time, I would rather try and get used to using that, at least at the beginning, than accidentally cut myself today. So, and you know, too, it's always a learning experience. If you get hurt with any craft, that's a sign that, you know, maybe you just didn't do something right. So you can see I jumped ahead a bit. I got my T cut out, I got the H, and I'm working on the letter O. And the letter O, I think, is definitely the hardest because it's a circle. And just like with that circle before, I'm tending to want to cut and then trim it away and trim it away and clean it up, and then I might end up losing that completely. So I need to be careful. And I'm just making a very small movement while with the other hand rotating the linoleum around. And it's looking a little bit jagged right on the edge, but maybe I'm just being really picky. I think this is looking pretty good though. Pretty pleased with that. Oh, it was smooth. Yeah, that worked out okay. You know, celebrate your successes, always. I did make a little boo-boo right there on the side of that H and right there on the side on that one too. And, you know, there's that temptation to go back and just cut and cut and cut. I'm trying to resist that temptation because, like I said, I could potentially lose a letter completely if I just go crazy cutting at it. Now, one thing I find I am struggling with a little bit is ending the cut. And I think that's just a matter of pivoting the tool. So, you know, you kind of come in and you're scooping out and you kind of keep the tool at a steady, angle. And then as you're coming and ending the cut, to tilt the blade upward, and that will end in a nice smooth transition. So here, let's try that. So now I'm sliding the tool at one steady pace, and then now I'm going to angle it, and that one I angled just a little bit too sharply. There we go. Okay, so I think that's definitely something to play with, is the angle of the tool, and then just kind of, it's just tilting, you know? That's really the thing to think about, just tilting it up. That looks good. Sometimes I'm a little further away from it than I think I would be if I was cutting, you know, I think my face would be a lot closer to this, so sometimes I'm having a little trouble seeing it. And then of course, my lines are just in pencil, so that makes it just a little tricky to see too. And then one thing I would say definitely watch out for if you really get into this is watch out for how long you spend hunched over, you know, bent over and cutting. Definitely stop and take breaks, stretch out your shoulders, stretch out your back, and if you can, try and have this up where it's not, you know, it's not so low on your table that you're really hunched over. I think that would be bad long term. There we go. And now I've got a little cutout for that letter A. Let's see if I can do this. I'm catching myself holding my breath as I do these little tiny cuts. There we go. That looks good. I'm pleased with that. That looks really good. Now, as you can see, as I'm lifting up, I'm kind of tilting the blade over. I'm not actually close enough to my hand to cut myself, so don't worry about that. All right, that's looking good. I'm pretty pleased with that. Now let's try some of this more complex background because all of this is in here. And what I'm going to do is where it's colored in, I'm actually going to take that down and that's going to be background, and then the rest of this is going to be raised. So let's start right here. So I'm going to cut into the A and cut into the A, and then that whole section just gets emptied out. And yeah, I should probably change blades at this stage because I know that there's some better blades that cut away more and would probably cut away faster, but I'm feeling like this is a good blade for me to stick with at this beginning stage because it kind of stops you from cutting away too much. So just to be instructive, let's grab another blade just so I can show you the difference. So let's see here, blade number 2, or this is blade number 3. Let's try this one. This has a deeper groove and it can cut a little bit more aggressively. So I'm going to come out here where I have a lot of space to work in, and yeah, you can see just how deep you can go and how quick. And it's a much wider cut all the way down. Now I haven't cut out that U yet, so that's a little risky, but here I'll make a couple more cuts here. So that will, you know, definitely in these background areas where I have a lot of space to cut out and I want to do that fairly quickly, I don't want to spend a million years on this, then sure, I think definitely grab a wider blade. Oops, you don't want to go too deep. Don't go too deep. Yeah, if you go too deep, you will actually cut through the linoleum and make a hole in it. So don't do that. Thankfully, I haven't made that mistake yet, but I watched a couple YouTube videos and I heard that that could be an issue, so watch out for that. Yeah, so, you know, that blade definitely does the job. I think the other blade, the A blade, will do the same job, it'll just take more cuts and more time. My fear, though, is, and this is just my own, you know, personal thing right this second as I'm getting started, is I would rather go a little slower and be a little bit less aggressive with this and use a blade that's, you know, it just seems a little safer than go with a more aggressive blade that's going to get it done faster. And I'm not in a super big hurry with this. I just want to enjoy it. And I want this to come out right. You know, I don't necessarily want to have to start all over again from scratch. So here we go. Let's try that cut, because as you can see right there, it was just getting a little bit messy. So let's try cleaning that up just a little bit with this A blade. Oop. There we go. That looks a little bit better. Yeah, and you know, like as you can see, I could probably have done all of those little cuts right there with one pass with the other blade, with that number 3, but I feel more in control with this A blade. Let's go ahead and cut this U out. It's a lot more curvy lines. And what's nice is the lino cutter, it comes with instruction sheet, and inside the instruction sheet, it tells you about the blades and what the different ones will will do, and which ones, you know, what they're good at. So definitely read through that if you go with this kit. I do think a kit is nice. You know, it's just nice to get all of the tools that you need at once without having to buy them all separately. And I thought this was a good deal. Where I bought this kit, it was $45, and then I used a coupon. So, you know, you can always find good deals if you look around, and then especially if you look for coupons, you can get started. And it's not a super huge investment. And I find this interesting because there's so many different ways of printing designs on fabric. And this is my ultimate goal with lino cutting, is to print some cool designs that I've cut out onto fabric. So, you know, there's dyeing, there's fabric painting, there's all kinds of things, but this is a method where you cut out the linoleum, the design once, and then you can use it multiple times. And I really like that, you know, and so many other ways of doing this, you know, it's far more time consuming and not nearly as repeatable. So I really like that idea. And then I just think that this style is really, really pretty too. All right, so I'm working on that U a little bit. That's getting a little bit messy. You know, it's one of those funny things. I think that the more you do this and the more times that you cut a design, then the better you'll get at being able to see how to tackle it first and what order to go in. And I think that just comes with experience more than anything else. There we go. That's where I'm at with my thank you card linoleum. I'm going to continue cutting, and I'll meet you back here when I have a few more tips and things that I have picked up from cutting out this cute design. So I've just finished cutting this out, and I'm super pleased with the results. A few places that I struggled with, definitely this thin line here with the Y, how I have it curl out like that. I just started nipping away at it just a little bit too much there. The O went well. Even when I cut out the center where the sun rays all come together, that worked out okay. I did go back through, and where I did not cut the background away, I widened the line around the letters, and in a few places that caused a few issues. But overall, I'm super pleased with it. You know, some of my lines started to go a little faint because I'm left-handed. I tend to drag my hand across as I'm working, and I think just in general, the pencil marks start to fade after a while. So about halfway through, I went through and darkened up those lines in the background so that way I could really see them as I cut those. I did change blades. I went to a number 4 blade to cut out this background area, and you can see those cuts are different. You can see how much wider they are, how much more they take away, and that went faster. So, you know, it was like 1 minute to finish cutting up all the background in this area. So all around, that went really quickly once I changed blades and cut out that background. And I'd say my next piece, I'll probably have a lot more background in it, but you know, that is kind of the time consuming thing. You're cutting away all of that extra to leave the design in relief. So I'd say the less that you can cut away and the more the more material that stays raised, the better, the faster you will have it finished. Now looking on the sides, you can see I did not cut too deep down the sides. So if I'm careful, I could potentially take this and mark and cut another design on the back side, so long as I'm careful not to cut too deep on that side either. So that's definitely something to think about. You know, you can create lots of different designs using just one piece of linoleum. Okay, so now that I have cut this out, I am super excited. It is time to grab some paint and actually try printing this. So I'm gonna go grab some cards, some paper, clean up all this stuff here from cutting it out, and I'll meet you back here when we're ready to do our first linocut print. So we're ready to start printing. I've got my ink, my tray. I checked the name on this. This is a brayer, so I've got that ready to go here too. And the 3 things that I have already carved and are ready to go. So I'm just gonna open this up, and we're just gonna try the block printing ink that came with this kit. And this is just a water-based black ink, and I'm just gonna start with, let's start with that much. I honestly have no idea how much to use, and I think this is one of those things that you just have to kind of, this is just one of those learning curves. I think this more than anything else is going to be the tricky part. Using too much ink, you'll make a mess, I think. and then not enough ink, you won't get a good print. So I'm just gonna go back and forth here, spreading that out, and you can see I started with about, that was about double the amount that you would use for toothpaste is about how much as I put out. I would guesstimate maybe half of that would be better because this is looking a little thick to me. Maybe feeling a little thick, and that's why I'm spreading it out quite a bit in the tray. I'm just kind of going back and forth and back and forth. And that's also helping me make sure that I have a nice even coat all around. And what it said in the instructions was whenever it sounds sticky, and here you can hear that, that sounds sticky. So I think we're there. So let's start out with this one. This was the second thing I carved, and I'm just gonna go, whoops. I'm gonna print on this piece of paper, and this is kind of just my test paper. So I think it's a-okay to make mistakes. I think you should give yourself permission to make lots of mistakes with the first ones. Okay, let's go this way a little bit too. That's looking good to me. I'm gonna set that down. And then, let's see, let's actually make this the test paper. Let's make this like kind of the scrap paper. And let's really actually try and do a real print on this. So I'll lay that down. And then this is just that tool that I put back together again. And here I'm just going to use that to press firmly, just rolling that around, sliding it over the surface. And then I'm going to lift it off. There we go. Okay, that looks interesting. Let's see if I can make this a continuous design. So I'm going to roll again, get a little bit more paint, put it back on the scrap paper here, and roll over it again. It's kind of making me wish that I had, you know, kind of some extra space around the edges just so I could hang on to it a little bit better, but not too bad. Definitely going to be messy though. Definitely going to get it on your fingers. And you might get it on your clothes, so make sure to wear something you don't really care. You know, if your clothes get a little dirty, get a little ink on them. You don't want to move the lino cut. You want to keep it in one position and then just press firmly. There we go. I'm seeming to get always at least one set of squares that aren't fully covered. So let's see if we can work on that. Might be that I'm not pressing down firmly enough and I need to spend more time mushing it with the tool. You know, it might be that, it might be the paint. I'm looking at it though, and that seems to me like I have plenty of paint on that piece. So let's try it again. What's cool about this is, as you can see, it's lining up pretty nicely. And so this is a continuous stamp, and you know, I could print an entire piece of paper, an entire piece of fabric with this. So I really like that. And I don't mind that it's not coming out just exactly perfect. I don't mind that the paint's not consistent, but I just like to know why. So this one, I'm gonna spend a good 30 seconds going back and forth on it and really pressing. I'm trying not to move the linoleum, but I am trying to get this much more evenly pressed. And I think that's going to really make the difference. And this is my very first time ever printing this way. I have never done a print, and I don't do stamping or anything like that very often. So this is very, very new. And I'd say, yeah, definitely have a lot of learning to do, but that's what's fun. Here we go. Oh, much, much better. Okay, so we can definitely say we're even on the ink. I think that's perfectly fine. And as you can see, I'm just rolling that and just continue to roll back and forth on my tray and load up the brayer and then come over here and coat. I'm just going to call these stamps because that's really what it feels like to me. I mean, I know it's a lino cut now, but this feels like a stamp to me more than anything else, and that's what I want to call it. So I'm going to call it a stamp. So I've loaded up the stamp. It's good to go. And I think I've been keeping that. No, it doesn't look like I've been consistent with which way it's been oriented, so I'm just going to go with it. And this time, again, really take my time mushing and smooshing. And I'd say if you have a, a pasta roller or something like that, a press that you could send this through, then I think that would definitely work too. I have an AccuQuilt Go, which is, a fabric cutting machine, but I think if I stacked up my layers of, cutting mats together, then I could probably send this through too and be able to use that as a printing press. Just an idea, but I just wanted to keep this, with just the materials that came in the kit that I bought and keep it really, really simple. And I'm still very satisfied with these results. I don't think you're going to get 100% absolute perfect results from the very, very first print. I think it's going to take at least a dozen before you're really getting consistent results. And that one, that really looks the best. I think I was most evenly coated with paint and I spent the most time mushing it. So that's really cool. Okay, let's try this one. And you might be wondering about the color on this. I just used a permanent magic marker on that just so that way I could see the flower shape that I was creating. Let's just roll that on and maybe rotate it around so it's nice and even. There we go. All right, and as you can see, I just made a mess. This is the thing. I mean, I'm getting this stuff all over me. I think it's real easy to get messy with this stuff. And if you're trying to do something really perfect and not have any, mess ups on it, that would be tough. Maybe wear gloves. That would be my one idea, my one suggestion would be maybe wear gloves, and then as soon as they get paint on them, because like right now I've got paint all over the tips of my fingers, and that's causing me to mark up the paper. So once you get paint on your fingers, you could take off the gloves. I've got paint up my wrist now. So yeah, I think it's definitely something messy. You're gonna need to practice in order to figure out how to not be too messy with this. Well, that one turned out okay. Definitely wanna aim for more paint, I think. I don't think I've really loaded up my brayer enough the last time. Let's try that again. I'm just gonna go for just a nice, I'm gonna try and cover up that little streak right there. Let's see if that'll work. And I definitely want to try this also on fabric. And I have these fabric paints. I'll just read this to you while I'm mushing on this. So this is an oil-based ink, but it still cleans up easily with soap and water, for use on cotton, polyester blends, linen, rayon, and other synthetic fibers, not for use on nylon. That's interesting. Also works great on paper and cardboard. Printed fabrics can be laundered after curing 1 week at room temperature. Cool water and mild soap is preferred when laundering. So that strikes me as, pretty much most fabric paints do that. If you paint fabric with any sort of fabric paint, I really like the Jacquard textile paints. You don't have to heat set them in any way. You just kind of leave the piece to dry and cure for a week or so. And that is all you need to do. That's all you need to worry about. Not like that over dyeing fabric, which dyeing fabric tends to have a very complicated washout process. And paint just tends to be a little bit easier. Okay, I've got another streak. I'm going to try and cover it up here. If I can properly position the flower, maybe I'll be able to cover that up. Yeah, they're definitely going to need a little bit more practice as far as not making a giant mess with the ink on my fingers and on the stamp. I've got a little raise in the table right there, so I was moving it so I'm not teeter-tottering over that raise in the table. So I definitely think that one turned out better because I spent more time burnishing it here, going over and over and over again. Let's see what this one's going to look like. Well, I know that I've gotten paint here in this background area, and then now that's starting to mark up the paper. So that's something to be careful about. Obviously I've got a lot of extra background. I could cut that away. So just something to think about, lesson learned. That one was my very first cut, so I don't expect it to be very perfect. Now let's start doing thank you cards. This is the big event here. I'm gonna really load up my brayer with paint. Going back and forth this way and back and forth this way. Now it's really sounding sticky. You can hear that. That is exactly the sound you want. So I might have started with just too much paint on the tray to start with. So maybe just the amount that you use on your toothbrush at night to start with, and then add more. You can always add more. It's harder to take away. All right, there we go. So now we're gonna roll this on evenly. Whoops. Okay. Now roll it. Ooh, definitely getting it on that side. That might not work out all that well. We'll see. All right, now I'm gonna wipe off all of my fingers here before I flip this guy over. Let's start from those corners. Okay, we're just gonna roll it over and press it down. So it might be that for bigger stamp, I need a bigger brayer. I don't know. Maybe I just rolled off the edge right there, and that's why I was hitting the background with the paint. Kind of hard to say. You know, I really feel like so much of this is just trial and experimentation. And then certainly, you know, I'm out in the crafty cottage right now playing around. I don't have a sink just right next to me so I can go wash my hands. If I was in the house, I would be washing my hands up, making sure that, you know, my hands stay clean, and I could even wash off the stamp too if I needed to. Okay, let me rotate it around so you can really see it. Well, that's interesting. I think that turned out really good overall. I'm really pleased with that. Looking at the areas that got a little tricky, and that K, right around the K, looks a little tricky. Didn't have very much paint over the U, the Y and U, but other than that, I am super pleased with that. I think it looks really cool, and it's exactly the look that I was going for. You know, you kind of have to think about, you know, what you're cutting away and how that's leaving the design. So, okay, all right, awesome. Now I'm gonna try and actually print a real card. Let's see. Now these are just simple blank cards, and I wanna try and print that with a thank you so I can send it to somebody. Okay, let's try. Load this up. I'm gonna be a lot more careful and mindful as I load up the stamp, and let's see if I can maybe even wipe away some of this where it went in the wrong places. I didn't see anything in that printout that I did first that I needed to recut or polish up. And what's interesting too with this, looking at it carefully, where I was really obsessing about my lines being perfect, you know, around the U, you can see that I really ended up chopping away a lot at that. So I made it skinnier, which made it harder to see. You know, I made it less and less of a shape by being obsessive about the outline, where in other places where I didn't care so much, like the H, I kind of left it chunky. I think that looks better overall. So lesson learned there, don't cut away too much. Even if you think the line's gonna be a little bit clunky, I think you should leave it. Okay, let's try this. I'll be a lot more careful this time. And I don't feel like I have quite as much paint, so I'm going to reload right now. And carefully go in this direction. Maybe go at a diagonal. Maybe that's a good idea. Let's try that. I had to grab a tissue because I was worried my fingertips were just so covered in paint. All right, so I'm going to leave the stamp face up this time. And I'm going to place the card on top and just try and visually center this up. So this is a different way of printing. Let's see if this works. So I'm just mushing and then pressing. Now it looks like I got a little bit of paint on my burnishing tool, so I'm getting a little bit of paint on the back of this card, but that's okay. More than anything else, when learning any new skill, is just to go into it with an open mind. And I would not anticipate or expect perfect results. You know, expect your paint to be uneven and expect there to be empty spots and expect it to not print perfectly and to go into it, you know, honestly wanting that effect. I think that's the better way to look at it. All right, so this looks good. Let's peel it away and see how that came out. Okay, I think that looks really good. Maybe I'm not hitting that side as I'm burnishing, because you can see I missed it down here all the way to up there, but I think it's nicely centered and you can see the words really clearly. I think that came out great. Let's make another one. Let's set that right here so it can dry. And there's all different kinds of paint, and there's all different kinds of colors of fabric paint too. So I think there's just so many things that you can do with this technique and things that you can play with. And once you cut the linoleum, you know, it's pretty much good to go. You can do this, you know, as far as I know, you can do this hundreds of times. There's no limit on how many times you can use it. I think some types of the linoleum will harden with time, but there are ways that you can keep it soft. Just a little bit I was reading talked about, you know, putting it in a bag, so when you're not using it, keep it in a Ziploc bag, and that'll keep it from going too stiff. So little things like that I think will really help. But once you get your piece cut, you can make lots of prints. And I think that's a good use of your time. Okay, just kind of centering that up. All right, let's go all around. Let's start in the center. I'm going to go around and around and around. Now I'm going to go all to the edges. We're going to go back and forth. Little tiny movements. I'm putting a lot of pressure down on this thing. Back and forth, back and forth. And I'm moving pretty slow. I tend to get bored with certain techniques. You know, when I'm ironing, I like to wiggle my iron around. So it might be that I'm just getting bored during this burnishing process because I'm so excited about seeing the finished print that I want to peel it off early. And I got to just take more time doing this part of it. You know, and it seems like Instagram, I've been following a lot of linocut artists on Instagram, and what the part they show you is the peeling off part. So you get to see the beautiful finished print, but you don't get to see the whole process of, you know, what they took, you know, they were mushing on it or sending it through a roller or whatever. You know, they don't really show that part of the process. Okay, so let's peel this off carefully. Take a look. Again, we've got just that little bit of an issue on this side. Might be how I'm applying the paint. We'll try that next. We'll try applying the paint a little bit differently. But overall, I'm super pleased with that one too. Oops, I do see a mistake I made. These are apparently Hallmark cards, and I printed that right on top of the Hallmark logo and upside down. Okay, lesson learned. I should face all of these cards the right way up, so that way that logo won't get in my way again. There we go. Okay, let's rotate this around so that way I'm applying ink the opposite direction and see if that makes a difference. And again, load up my brayer. Probably another 2 prints before I add a little bit more ink to this. Okay, and let's add this. Oops, yeah, rolling off the edge. I'm not so sure if that's a good idea. Maybe come from one angle and then switch hands and come from the other angle. And that way you're sure that you've got paint going all the way across and all of those nooks and crannies. Okay, this time Hallmark is in the right direction because this is upside down. Centering it up, and there we go. This time I'm not going to spend as much time intentionally. We're just going to go around 1, 2, 3, and now the edges 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Kind of good to know, like the minimum you can get away with. All right, so definitely that makes a difference. I feel like if I had spent more time that we would have had better ink coverage there, but look at those edges. We got paint all around. That's really perfect. So I'd say inking this way and inking that way definitely had better results. And yes, it's worth your time to do that little extra time spent rolling the brayer around, because as you can see, sorry, not the brayer, the burnisher around, because as you can see, this had a much better coverage, much thicker coat, versus this, we have these spots missing. So another lesson learned. So I'm going to load it up one more time. And we're going to go across this way. And we're going to go across, and I'll load it up again. The reason I'm loading it up in between rolls is simply because I feel like I'm running low on paint. And now I'm going to roll across this way. And that's just making sure all of those edges are completely covered. Okay, now let's combine all the lessons we've learned. We know to roll the paint from both directions. We know to keep the card the right way up and making sure the logo is in the right direction. Definitely going to get some plain cards the next time I do this. Centering it up. And now we also know to spend a little bit more time going around, do those sides, get those in really well, but then also spend some time in the middle where we mostly didn't get good coverage of the paint before. It was just kind of in that in-between stage, in between the middle and those edges. So round and around and around. I'd say 20 seconds. If I had to guesstimate about how much time you should do this, I'd say 20 seconds or so. And what is it, the happy birthday song lasts 30 seconds or something like that? I don't know. Maybe you could sing to yourself. And then once you're done with the song, no matter how fast you sing it, then you know it's done. There we go. All right, let's peel this one away and see how it looks. Well, nearly perfect. I would say that is very good. So we have learned a lot through this process, and I'd say all 4 of these came out a little bit differently, but they all came out beautiful, and I'm absolutely planning on using them, probably except for this messed up one with the Hallmark thing on it. But all of these came out great, and I'm super pleased with my other stamps too. I think those are going to make some interesting designs. And no matter what you're cutting, you're going to learn something new with every stamp and every design that you create. And I think the very first thing starts with just sketching and thinking about things that you would love to print. Think about fabrics and what you would like to see on fabric too. If there's a design or a shape or even a whole image, a whole portrait of something that you really like, that you would love to see on fabric, absolutely possible to cut it in lino, be able to make then lots of prints, and be able to put that together and make some really cool projects and beautiful quilts. So that's it for this tutorial. I really enjoyed learning how to cut this linoleum stamp and make some thank you cards. I learned a lot in this process, not only how deep to cut out the background, but also all the steps of the printing process, which was a lot more complicated than I was expecting. I truly believe I'm gonna have to do probably 100 or 200 prints before I really get the hang of that part of it. And printing on fabric is gonna be a whole other adventure as well. So I had a great time, and I hope that you enjoyed seeing what lino cutting was like for a total beginner. Definitely give this video a like and a thumbs up, and subscribe to my channel on YouTube to find more videos on quilting and crafting and much more. Until next time, let's go make something cool.